Right, before we get started, I've got two new bits of equipment. New light, which is, oh! But check this out, different colour temperatures. Ooh. And, well, just a lav mic, which is all tangled up. Testing, testing. Anyway, I've digressed before I even begun. A couple of years ago, 3 years ago? 2 or 3 years ago, I was shooting exclusively with a micro four thirds camera, which has got a sensor that's just tiny. And the whole time I was thinking to myself, would I be better off with a camera that had a bigger sensor? Naturally, at the time I did what everyone does when they're looking for new camera equipment. I went on one of the many forums, but what I found was basically a bloodbath. Oh my god. Why is it on forums that the only person who is willing to learn something is the person that asks the question? Everyone else just thinks they're 3,000,000% right and can't bring themselves to. Anyway, this isn't a video about forum beef, but it wasn't particularly helpful. But fast forward to today, and I have been using a big sensor for 2 or 3 years, and I've also kept my small sensored camera. So naturally, the big question is, which is best? And the answer is, it depends. Sucks as an answer that, doesn't it? But let me explain. Outside. Okay, I'm outside for 2 reasons. The first of which is, well, I mean, it's sunny. The second, like I need another reason, is that the people on the photography forums, after the backstabbing and the name calling and the death threats, generally agree on a couple of issues when it comes to sensor size. Number one, in good light like this, a big sensor has little or no advantage over a smaller sensor. Now believe it or not, I've not just been sunning myself all afternoon. Actually, that's not difficult to believe, look how pasty I am. Milk bottle. I've been in the garden taking pictures with both my Nikon D750 full frame camera and my Lumix G80 micro four thirds camera. And they've got different aspect ratios, but generally I've been trying to get exactly the same shot with each. Now, I know that this is a flawed test. I've only been using one full frame camera, I've only been using one micro four thirds camera. I've only been using one lens on each, and those lenses aren't really comparable. The Nikon has 24 megapixels, the Lumix has 16. This is a flawed test. In fact, you can't even call it a test. It's a terrible comparison. The only point I'm trying to make with it though, is that in light like this, both of them are more than capable of producing clean and sharp results. And the second thing that people on the forums agree with, after they've done with the my dad's bigger than your dad, is that when the light drops, that's when big sensors come into their own. Now, I'm not going to stand here and disagree that if you have a full frame sensor versus a crop sensor, that you have the same aperture, same shutter speed, same ISO settings, and you're in a low light scenario, the full frame sensor is more than likely to give you the cleaner result. But I don't think you'll ever be in a situation where your settings are exactly the same. And the reason for that is called equivalence. You can hear your question now. What the fuck is equivalent? Well, I'm not going to try and describe how it works because as far as I'm concerned, it's some sort of black magic. If you know any different, leave a comment. But all I know is that this is a full frame lens and this is a micro four thirds lens. And if I put them on their respective cameras and set an aperture of, I don't know, f8, then this lens on the micro four thirds system will actually be at the full frame equivalent of f16. So on the micro four thirds system and all other crop systems, the aperture and the focal length is reduced compared to a full frame system. But what difference does that make? Well, as you can see, I'm back in the garden and the sun is going down. I tried to film this bit yesterday on the beach, but it didn't go very well. Right, so we're here on the beach. I'm gonna be quick because it's absolutely freezing. As you can see, I've got...
Why? I'm looking interestingly at the camera. Go back!
So, right, as you can see, we're on the beach and I've got my Nikon set up. Oh.
I thought I was helping.
As you can see, we're on the beach and anyway, okay, so here's the deal. I've set up a low light shot in the back of the garden, and as you can see, there's the garden wall in the background. In the foreground, you've got these flowers. Now, I want everything in focus in the shot, which means that on the Nikon, I've had to set up at f14 to make sure that that's the case. The other problem that I've got is that, as you might be able to tell, there's a bit of a breeze this evening, which means the flowers are being blown around. So to make sure that I don't get any motion in the shot, I don't really want to go below an 80th of a second. So I've gone to an 80th of a second on the Nikon, but that's meant that I've had to boost the ISO to 1000. Meanwhile, on the micro four thirds camera, because of equivalence, to get the same depth of field as the Nikon, I only have to be at f7.1. What that means is that I can get a shutter speed of an 80th of a second while only being at ISO 400. So I'll take these shots. I've got them on timers and they're on separate tripods just to make sure that I take the shots at exactly the same time because the light is falling fast. So I'm going to stand here for the next 20 minutes or so, as long as I don't get bored, and I'll take a shot every 5 minutes-ish as we go up the sensitivities, and I'll show you the results now. Well, with the same depth of field and same shutter speed, I can't tell much of a difference. Again, I know that this is the furthest thing from a scientific test. I mean, the crops are completely different because the cameras have different resolutions. But the only thing I'm really trying to say in this video is that if you buy a camera that has a small sensor, like a Micro Four Thirds camera that I'm filming this on, you might be pleasantly surprised by the image quality. Especially considering that a small sensor usually comes in a fairly small body, a fairly light body, and comparative to full frame, a fairly cheap body. Now obviously a full frame camera can shoot in shallower depths of field with slower lenses, and they can usually fit more pixels onto the sensors without affecting noise too much. But if you don't need crazy resolution, you don't shoot in really shallow depths of field that much, then my suggestion is that you don't discount any modern cameras just based on their sensor size. As for why I use a full frame camera, it turns out that I actually don't use this because it's full frame. I use this because it's got brilliant dynamic range. Now before anyone tells me that a big sensor means better dynamic range, I beg to differ. There are plenty of full frame cameras on the market that don't boast particularly good dynamic range. This one does. I think the sensor in this is made by Sony. It's brilliant, and I'll probably do another video on why dynamic range is important to me. So hopefully you've learned something in this video. If you haven't, hopefully you at least enjoyed me just messing up on the beach. If so, please give it a like. And also, if you haven't already, please subscribe. As you may have noticed, I'm still sort of quite new to this video stuff, and I don't really know what to do with my channel. I don't know whether it should be for people who are new to photography. I don't know whether to try and focus my videos on people who are already interested in photography, or just to do behind the scenes of my own photography stuff, or for it to not be about photography at all. I don't know, let me know what you think, but I don't know where I was going with that. Thank you very much for watching.